So thank you all so much for your patience. And without further ado, I want to turn it over to Mayor Keith James to open us up. Mayor James.
Thank you, Denzel. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our second Racial and Ethnic Equality Action Summit. We've come such a long way since our first Action Summit in December, and also the establishment of the task force. I am so thrilled to see how much progress has been made. You know, I created this task force almost 1 year ago in July 2020, in light of the murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. His murder ignited outrage nationwide and exposed the deeply entrenched systemic racism in our country. The city of West Palm Beach was the first in our region to establish a task force for racial and ethnic equality. And the purpose of the task force is to identify and help address issues of racial and ethnic equalities in our city, while also addressing our city's historical disparities, all in order to achieve greater equity. Not only do we want to establish new policies, we also want to eliminate the historical systemic barriers to equality and success in our city. Since our first Action Summit in December, where we were directly able to hear your thoughts and concerns, the task force and policy area members have been working diligently to ensure that these concerns are prioritized and addressed so that we can uplift all communities in West Palm Beach and make lasting change. And before I go any further, I need to offer a special thanks to our many outreach supporters and to our community partners who have offered their spaces as satellite sites. Those partners are the Police Athletic League, the Esperanza Community Center, the Downtown Development Authority, South Olive Community Center, Coleman Park Community Center, and the Mandel Public Library. We could not have had such an accessible, equitable, and successful Action Summit without your help. I will now turn it over to Donzel Robinson for one final item as we close. Donzel?
Thank you, Mayor. And so once again, thank you all for joining for the second virtual Racial Ethnic Equality Action Summit. As indicated, my name is Donzel Robinson, and I'll be your main facilitator for today. But it's not just me. My colleague, Kayla Elson, will be walking you through the priorities for each task force subcommittee. And we have a cadre of breakout room facilitators who will be leading those small discussions that we'll be having throughout today. We're all here to continue the conversation from December, as the mayor indicated. The purpose for us gathering here today is to give feedback to the task force and the policy area subcommittee members about their initial priorities, their progress, and if you, the community, think they are heading in the right direction. We want to engage with each other, learn from each other, work together to continue to lay the strong foundation of equity for the city. For those of you who were not in attendance for our December Action Summit, we had everyone in breakouts and for facilitated conversation, and they picked the policy area that they wanted to speak to. Today, we're going to speak to all of the policy areas. But before we dive into that discussion, let's review some ground rules for today. So first, we want everyone to speak openly and honestly. We want you to listen carefully and respectfully. Keep comments brief because we have a lot to talk about. If you're a person who traditionally leans forward, we want you to give room for others. And if you're a person who tends not to speak, we want you to speak up because you have a lot to offer. Ultimately, we want to explore our differences respectfully and look for common ground. Now that everyone is on the same page, let's do a quick tech review. So by now, I'm sure you've all used Zoom over this kind of, tremendous year of COVID. But just to run through it again, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see the Zoom toolbar. Going from left to right, you have a microphone icon where you can mute or unmute yourself. All participants will be muted unless there is a designated time to speak, like the breakouts, so we can reduce the background noise. Everyone will be able to mute themselves, again, unmute themselves during the breakout. Next is the video camera icon, which enables you to turn your camera off or on. Further down the toolbar, you'll see the participant icon, which lets you know who's participating and how many people are participating. The chat icon allows you to message participants and read the messages of others, as you can see. Um, and then, during the breakout, you'll have an opportunity to speak. If you need to add to your comments, you can use the raise hand function or the raise hand icon. And you can access the raise hand icon by clicking on the reaction button and then clicking the raise hand button. If you have any technology issues, we have a technology lead and a technology assistant. Emma Lipsky is the technology lead and Brendan Endesay is her assistant. We're going to put Emma's email address in the chat. It's Emma@JSA LLC, so that she can assist anyone who has technical issues throughout the event. So next, we're going to just talk about some tips for the summit. Again, we talked about during the presentation, we want you to remain on mute. You can adjust your view on the screen at the upper right corner so that you can see the person speaking, or if you want to see, everyone in the Zoom, you can do both. When we go to breakouts, you will see a button that says, enter your breakout room. Feel free to click that button or you will automatically be moved. If during the breakout you aren't moved, just simply put something in the chat and we will assist you. If you take a break, and we have breaks scheduled throughout the day, we're going to ask you to stay logged in. That way we can make sure that we smoothly transition in and out of breaks. And we ask that you keep all communications, verbal or written, courteous. So with that, we're ready to kind of start the day by looking at today's agenda. And so first thing we're going to do is see who's in the room. We're going to do an opening poll. We're going to, have a baseline set around what the goals and objectives of both the task force has been and what we want to achieve today from our co-chairs. And like I said, as soon as we do that, we're going to begin with you talking because we want to hear from you today. We don't want to talk at you. So we're going to first have this breakout and discussion around criminal justice. Then we're going to discuss health. Once we do that, we have a group of people who are theming everything that you say. So we're going to collect that information. We're going to synthesize it. And once we get through the health discussion, we're going to look at the themes from criminal justice. We'll continue with real estate discussion and finance, banking, and business discussion. Once we finish with those two discussions, we'll come back. Next slide, please. We'll come back and do the health themes, and then we'll do the real estate themes. We'll do our final breakout around education and workplace, and then we'll finish the day by looking at all of the remaining themes that we have. We have a presentation that talks about understanding the root causes and the legacies of past harm and how it's felt in the present. And then once we finish the conversation up, we'll have closing remarks by Mayor James, next steps. And so that we can understand and perfect our process, we'll ask you to evaluate today's session before you leave. And then we will adjourn. So we're looking forward to an exciting opportunity to do that. But first, as I indicated, we want to see who's in the room. So what we're going to do now is open our polls. And again, I just want to, welcome our participants from South Olive Community Center, Coleman Park Community Center, Esperanza, and those in the downtown Mandel Library. They won't be reflected in this poll, but we are collecting that information. So at this time, as you can see, we want to know how you are connected to West Palm Beach. We want you to check all of the options that apply. So if you live in West Palm Beach, please click that. If you work in West Palm Beach, worship, own a business, shop, or none of the above, we want to hear from you. And as you go through, you will see that you can scroll down. All right. So once you've checked all the apply, the next question that we're looking for is for you to let us know how you identify yourself racially and ethnically. If you're an African American, non-Hispanic, Black Hispanic, Black Caribbean, West Indian, brown Hispanic, white non-Hispanic, white Hispanic, white Caribbean, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, or other. Finally, third is please share your gender, male, female, other, or non-binary gender assigned. We also want to know what your age is, and one of the things we're excited about is the POW Center, which is a youth-only group who will be participating in today's summit. So we're so excited that you all are here. We look forward to hearing from you and you contributing to the conversation. So we have 15 to 19, 24, 20 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and 65 or better. So please let us know what your age is. The fifth question is, and the final question is, how does racial and ethnic discrimination and inequality in West Palm Beach impact you? Now, we know that there are many different impacts, but we've kind of captured some general areas and we hope that you can identify those for us. So, it's the way you live, the way you work, outside of your home and work, regarding your health, well-being, and safety, mobility issues, your finances. So we want you to, try to capture that. And again, love the fact that you all are putting this information in the chat so that we can grow. Heard about now I want to acknowledge like the disappointment around the race categories. We continue to grow. And so we look forward to you having that conversation in the chat. But more importantly, we want to make sure that we have these types of conversations, even in our small breakouts. So we're going to give you all about 2 minutes. I apologize for pushing this so fast, but we do want to kind of catch up with our schedule. So if we can, SJ, if you can give me a 1-minute song so to give people time to finish out this, I greatly appreciate it. But we have about 72% of those who are presently here, and we look forward for those who can, are here. We hope you can stay through the whole day, and we look forward for others joining us as they are available. But with that, we're ready to end the poll. Let's take a look at the results that we have so far. So, with regards to how people are connected today, of those that responded, 61% live in West Palm Beach, another 55% work, and then 53 also shop there. And then, of course, closing out, we have 24% that worship, 20% that own a business, and 14% that are none of the above. But we're glad you're here and that you are connected. As we begin to look at identity through race and ethnicity, we have that of those responded, 28% that are white, non-Hispanic, 39% are African-American, non-Hispanic, Caribbean. We have 12%, which are white Hispanic, and then we have 9% that are Black Hispanic, Black Caribbean, West Indian, brown Hispanic, 3%. And then we have, closing that out, white Caribbean, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, and other. Of those, 70% are female and 40% are male. We have 1% that is non-gender assigned, non-binary, or gender assigning. Of those of age group, we have 4% that are ages 15 through 19. We have 57% or 47% that are between the ages of 35 and 54. And we have roughly 46% that are 55 or better. When we talk about the racial and ethnic discrimination impacts of inequality, we have their health and well-being is the top selection with 47%. We also have, where they spend family members or they spend time outside of the home at 46%. Their workplace or the quality of their life at 43%. And then closing out the top 4, their finances, investment, or economic opportunity. So, and then actually the top getter, I apologize, I didn't scroll down, is their reputation and how they are perceived and or the trust relationship they need to build a stronger or more resilient city. So the place where most people feel that they're most impacted is how they're perceived. So we really appreciate you all taking the time to give us that information. And so what I want to do at this time is turn it over to our co-chairs who will let us set the table for us for today. So Patrick, I want to turn it over to you, and welcome to you and Michelle both.
Good morning, Donzel. Good morning to all of you who have joined us this morning. It is indeed a pleasure for you to join us and help us move our task force forward. I'd like to say that it's been an honor for us serving as task force co-chairs, and we're thankful for all of those who have made the task force a success. We would like to thank our 23 task force members and our policy area subcommittee members, our community partners, and the full Action Summit team for getting this done. Your work is very much appreciated and is what helps us move us forward to achieve our goal. The work of the task force has revolved around 3 goals, which we have been working on addressing since the December Action Summit. The first goal is to identify best practices and racial disparities in our city. The 5 main policy areas that we have come up with 2 initial priorities that they would like to begin addressing that came out of the December Action Summit. The second goal is to make recommendations to the mayor. After today's Action Summit, policy area members will be drafting strategies for their 2 initial priorities based on feedback from the community, which will eventually be sent to the mayor and the city commission for review. The third goal is to engage, listen, learn, and educate the community. We will be hosting monthly meetings for each policy area and the task force. We host many guest speakers and invite all community members to our meetings to share their ideas and concerns. Michelle.
Thank you so much. They unmuted me when you started, but I wanted to stay mute. Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, West Palm Beach. So excited to see everybody here today. Your voice today is extremely important to us and will inform the task force and the policy area members if we are headed in the right direction. The community's voice is so important to us in shaping the priorities and recommendations that are reflections of what progress you would like to see in our city. We changed the format of today's Action Summit from last December in order to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak about all of the 5 policy areas, and so that we can hear each of you, your thoughts, your concerns, your ideas for each of the 2 initial priorities that have been drafted for each policy area. This Action Summit serves as an opportunity for those who live, work, and play in West Palm Beach to come together in a productive space that addresses racial, ethnic, and cultural equality challenges and barriers in order to create lasting change in our community. We look forward to hearing from each of you. We want your input. We need everyone to be at this table so that we can continue working towards a more equitable city. Thank you so much for your participation today and lending your voice to the work that we have to do.
Thank you both for your welcoming words and for your hard work. So you've heard from us, and now we want to hear from you all. We're going to pivot to our policy area subcommittee presentations. During each presentation, we will watch a video of the subcommittee co-chairs giving us updates on their progress and priorities. And then my colleague, Kayla Elson, will walk us through each of the subcommittee's 2 initial priorities and the list of some of the ideas brainstormed for each of them. Before we pivot to our first presentation, we want to remind everyone of our 5 policy areas: criminal justice, education, including workforce development, finance, banking and business, health, and real estate and housing. Now we're going to start with criminal justice. Here are the criminal justice subcommittee members. Thank you all for your hard work.
Greetings, my name is Alexia Cox, and I serve as co-chair of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee. I, along with my co-chair, Daniel Eisinger, and the dedicated members of our subcommittee, have been working to fulfill the mission of the task force by reviewing past and current police practices and systems, identifying any patterns of racial or ethnic disparities, discovering best practices to address these disparities, as well as identifying best practices on policing in ways that will promote effective crime reduction while also building public trust. As you can imagine, this is a process, better yet, a journey, not a destination, and it takes time to do the work. Since our first Action Summit in December, we have put in time and we are doing the work. We listened to ideas and opinions voiced by those who attended the summit and decided to focus on 2 priority areas ranked most important by those in attendance. Our first priority is to build or maintain a diverse police department and create opportunities for the community to engage with the department through a review or advisory board. We are currently engaged in ongoing discussions and data review related to this priority. Some of our progress so far includes reviewing the makeup of the police department by race, gender, and rank. We specifically want to learn how the racial makeup of the department compares to the racial makeup of the city. We are examining the city's practices related to recruitment, attraction, hiring, retention, and promotion of police officers from diverse groups. We reviewed the compensation, both salary and benefits, for City of West Palm Beach police officers in comparison with other agencies in Palm Beach County. We wanted to determine if the city's offerings are competitive enough to attract and retain a diverse field of candidates. We intend to conduct a deeper dive into these areas. We have learned more about the city's current Use of Force Review Board and its makeup. This board operates internally and members of the public cannot participate. We are assessing whether and how members of the public can review law enforcement actions, practices, and policies and offer input and/or recommendations. We are also researching best practices for community engagement in this area. The intention of our first priority is to improve accountability and transparency between the West Palm Beach Police Department and the community they protect and serve. The second priority area addresses training. Are officers receiving adequate training in the areas of racial or cultural sensitivity and implicit bias? Is the training effective? How do we measure effectiveness? These are the questions we have been asking when we discuss training. We recently reviewed a study which suggests that typical bias trainings do not necessarily result in changed behavior. As a subcommittee, we recognize that increased and enhanced training on bias and cultural sensitivity can open an officer's mind to new ideas. However, it is not enough to create sustained changes in behavior. With that in mind, we are exploring methods to increase training, measure outcomes, and monitor behavior. In the coming months, we intend to conduct more research, hear from more experts, and engage in more discussions related to our 2 priority areas. We invite experts in the field to share knowledge and best practices related to our priority areas. In addition, it would be helpful to hear from the community, especially with regard to the creation of a police advisory or review board. On a final note, I would like to thank the City of West Palm Beach Police Department and Assistant Chief West for assisting us with compiling data and answering any questions we have, and also inviting guests to assist us and speak with us and help us acquire necessary information to complete our work. And finally, I would like to thank each of you for participating and joining us today. Thank you.
Just as a review, to speak to what Alexia Cox was saying, the first Criminal Justice Subcommittee priority is to build a diverse team of police officers and create opportunities for the community to participate in a police review or advisory board. Under this priority, some of the ideas that the subcommittee has discussed so far are to develop strategies for retaining police officers, particularly of color, target hiring of police officers who are residents of West Palm Beach, establish a civilian complaint review board or a community transparency board, and establish a portal for residents or other stakeholders to submit information or issues. The second priority under the Criminal Justice Subcommittee is to assess racial equity training and tools for increased cultural sensitivity of West Palm Beach police officers. And thus far, some of the ideas that have been discussed are to develop a measurement tool to assess the impact of racial sensitivity training in West Palm Beach, to institute randomized reviews or monitoring of police body cam footage to evaluate officer conduct, and for field training to require new officers to attend community meetings and have greater interaction with community members in their area. With these elements in mind, I turn it back over to Donzel to introduce our discussion.
Thanks, Kayla. So now we're going to transition into our breakout room portion of this presentation. For those of you who are on the satellite live sites, you're going to have your conversations right there where you are. For everyone else who's participating by Zoom, we're going to move you into the breakout rooms here on the Zoom application. Each breakout room will have a facilitator who will help conduct a productive discussion and will capture any ideas, thoughts that occur throughout the conversation. There will also be an interpreter for any bilingual breakout rooms. These ideas and thoughts will be submitted, that you all come up with will be submitted electronically on a separate website where our theme team will be reviewing all of the ideas submitted across all of the breakout sessions and synthesizing them into higher level thoughts, or wherever there's some kind of consensus being built around additional thoughts. When we are ready to transition out to our breakout sessions, again, you will be automatically moved. And again, each of our on-site locations will be automatically sent to their separate breakout room on the screen, but your conversation will happen in person. When we start our breakout rooms, you're going to be with the same individuals during this breakout throughout the day. So introduce yourselves. And again, be courteous, listen attentively, and share thoughts. And we just want to, we're going to have a technology reminder that we'll put into the Zoom just to remind you of the technology. When you enter your breakout, get ready to introduce yourself and share your thoughts. And there are 3 questions that we're going to ask you. And starting with criminal justice, based on what you heard, which of the issues from the subcommittee and their recommendations do you feel is on target, is heading in the right direction around identifying ways to gain racial and ethnic equality? Are there ideas or issues that may not have been talked about that should be? So we want to hear from you around new areas that could improve the work with regards to criminal justice. And then we want to hear from you, where would you like to see the conversation go? And more importantly, how can you help move the conversation forward? So what can be done to make sure that you have the opportunity to take ownership of the action as a resident and a participant of the city of West Palm Beach? So we're ready to send you out. Our team will bring you back automatically within 20 minutes. We will give each facilitator a 5-minute warning to let you know when we're going to be ending. And the key is to make sure that we record everything that is said. So one of the things that the facilitator may have you do is, if time is running out, enter your thoughts in the chat. But with that, we're ready to go. So we're going to transition to the breakouts. We'll see you on the other side. And yes, the questions will be put into the breakout rooms. All of our facilitators should have received a facilitator guide that also has the questions. We hope that you all had an interesting and exciting conversation in your breakout rooms. And we will now move on to our second presentation of the day, which is health, which means regrettably we got to send the Isley brothers away. And here are our health subcommittee members. We appreciate their efforts. And here is their information.
We focus on 2 priorities. First priority is basically improving the access of healthcare. Basically, we look at the educational side of it as well as the well-being resources that are available. All right, one of the things that we basically is we review city policies, because we want to increase the access to the healthcare, and also we want to find ways to basically handle the education aspects for the city. So in doing so, we're able to then look at other resources, and our mission is to basically come up with some real strong recommendations. The second priority that we focus on is basically the unequal distribution we find of information throughout the city. And so in understanding that, we also look at the basically a lot of the cities has mistrust in the politicians, in the healthcare systems, and all the other various aspects. So from our perspective, all right, we then have to identify community partners. We have to, for basically sharing information within the community, as well as we look to develop strategies. And finally, basically, we're addressing the historical, basically, mistrust that existed here and the cultural differences that may exist, and the other barriers that affect the marginalized communities. We also recognize the importance of understanding the lack of resources that's caused health disparities here in West Palm Beach, okay? So we have done it collectively, we have reviewed studies that have been reports, resources, data, all information that has been, and we compare these inequities from a national perspective, from a county perspective, and also from the local level. One of the major topics that we still always keep addressing and looking at is the community trust issue. And we look at that because a lot of people still have those issues with their physicians, with their hospitals. We look at it from the government's perspective. These issues are very concerning. So we've created a new environment of trust that we're looking to build, all right? Because we understand that the caseworkers, the actual health workers, the actual small businesses, and as well as individuals have been burdened with systematic inequalities. They have seen it, all right? And we're trying to get their confidence and that we're here to help them, all right? The impact of COVID is huge, simply because it has basically opened the door and all the inequities have resurfaced. And that is a major issue. So our role is to understand again where those inequities lie and then focus so that we can close that gap that has opened. The other thing is that we did create a brief community survey, all right? And this is how the first thing that you can do to help us, all right? Because in order to gain a better understanding of the health disparities that exist here in West Palm Beach, your experience matters with doctors, healthcare issues, hospitals, whatever you feel that you have not had access to healthcare. Because the challenges you face out there with doctors and hospitals and so forth is important to us, okay? The actual services that you are lacking, there may be some medical services you don't have, or you have to go too far, or you have to travel. We need to know. We need so we can help you make recommendations. One of the things we did in our service is ask those questions. We asked you, hey, how far do you have to travel to get to the doctor? Who is your doctor, or do you have one? Okay, health food. Are you eating healthy? Do you have access to healthy food? All right, these are important issues and questions that this simple survey can give us a lot of information and data. So our second half of this year's agenda as we move forward is basically improve access, which is important to healthcare, enhance the education, because we have to be educated in all aspects of healthcare so that we can get this health disparities changed. And we need to basically earn your trust as a community. And we're doing every effort possible to be able to earn your trust and do our job. And not only now, but for future generations as well. Because the fact is, we care.
So as was iterated, the first health subcommittee priority is to improve access to and education about healthcare services and well-being resources. Some of the ideas under this priority, as you can see here, are targeting resources towards community-based clinics, especially in underserved communities, to create mobile services to address medical needs in communities, promote policy aimed at ensuring equitable access to healthy and affordable food options, and to improve availability of resources for proactive and preventative health. Second priority is to address unequal distribution of information and build trust between marginalized communities and health institutions. Some of the ideas being discussed are to build partnerships with community leaders, such as clergy members, to distribute health information and education, as well as to build communities' desire for greater educational opportunities on how patients can access healthcare. Turn it over to Donzel to bring us into our next discussion.
Great, thank you, Kayla. And as was the case with the first breakout session, We're going to go back into our breakout room so you all can discuss your feedback, thoughts, and comments. I'm already seeing a lot of those comments in the chat, but please be sure to add them in the breakout room so that we can record them and document them. One of the things I love that I saw in the chat is people were not only talking about what they would like to see the task force do, but they're also talking about ways that they can contribute to the conversation. How can they own this process in making a more equitable and just West Palm Beach? So we want to send you in so that you can continue those conversations. And we would also like everyone to answer the questions. Which of the subcommittee ideas seem most on target? Are there ideas or issues that the subcommittee still needs to consider? Where would you like to see the conversation go? And then finally, how do you want to move the conversation forward? Offer your name and contact if you are comfortable. When you are finished with your discussion, we will be hearing from our theme team with the results from our first discussion on criminal justice and policy. Just as a kind of a production note, some of you all had smaller rooms with only a few people in it, so that we can have that full conversation. We're going to combine the participants that were in your small room with the participants that were in another small room to come together. So you may have some new folks in your breakout room this time, so please reintroduce yourself. And with that, we're going to move each person into their breakout room. Please be sure to reiterate your comments that you're putting in this chat in that conversation so that we can collect it. Thank you. And with that, we're going to move people to their breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everyone. And thank you all for joining us on a beautiful day in West Palm Beach. We all love the sunshine. So we'll now be reviewing the results of our theme team has come up with for our first discussion around criminal justice. So the way we're going to do this is, we're going to look at what you all have discussed. As I indicated, the theme team has put together all of the thoughts and ideas that they've heard. We're going to have you review them. And then what we're going to do is give you an opportunity to prioritize them. So if we can share the themes from the first criminal justice conversation. And so we asked you first, what was on target? And some of the things that we heard that were on target is that engagement needs to take place outside of crisis situation, meaning how do we begin to engage beyond the sentinel events that we hear about in the news. Support training of officers is on target around cultural sensitivity, mental health, language access, communications, and basically cultural competency. On target with increasing diversity in hiring that is representative of the community. Improving compensation for police officers and recognizing the correlation between pay and equity to create a diverse police force. Increase engagement specifically with Latino communities due to their fear of police, fear of reporting, crime, and victimization. Those who carry cash because they cannot open bank accounts. Having a Facebook page in Spanish is not enough. They're on target with the need to track more data regarding policing. And yes, examining how do we get to a point where citizens can be part of a review board. So those are the things that you all indicated were on target. When we look at what are some of the things that are missing, you talk about offering mental health training and counseling for police so that they can support and de-escalate a variety of situations that which may not be criminal. Be able to file a complaint without police retaliation is something that needs to be added. The need to address structural and procedural issues such as impact and the role of the sheriff's office, which is a county entity, the structure of the police department, what are requirements for new hires, what is the examination into their history around their extremist groups or existing ties. Exit interviews for those departing police officers. Why are they leaving? Examining who holds supervisory positions and how can police officers report internal issues. So those are the higher level. There were some that, that had the greatest amount of energy around them or critical mass. There are some additional ones that were added, but you won't be prioritizing, but we wanted to make sure you knew we captured them and you're aware. And I want to take this time to kind of point out all of the information that you shared during your breakout is being collected and will be presented to the task force at the conclusion of the summit. But those additionals were build better community engagement, trust relationship with police officers meaning they should be more integrated with the community. Police should be the same regardless of, I'm sorry, my message came up and it's blocking, treatment based on white privilege, and consider the needs of the homeless population. So how can police interact with the homeless population? So what we're going to do is we're going to put a link where you can go and click, and we want you to click that link. I'm sorry, Todd, somebody added a conversation. If you could, and we're going to make sure the Spanish translator is there. Here's the link. For those who are looking for the interpretation, please make sure you've clicked the globe and you selected the language you want. That will allow you to hear the Spanish interpreter voiceover. If you could click the link at the bottom of your chat, what it will do is take you to that will allow you to vote. And once you're able to vote, you will be able to, we'll be able to prioritize them. So what we're going to do is combine what you've identified as being on target. We're going to combine what you said what was missing. We're going to look at those and we're going to ask you to put them in priority. So we're going to ask you to vote for, I believe, the top 3. Is that right? So if we can bring up that screen so that we can begin to see individuals voting. All right, so what we will need you to do is click on the link and prioritize and vote for your top 3. And again, the link is in the chat. It will work from your computer or your smartphone. Just simply go to the chat, click on it, it will open its own window. And in that window, you will have the ability to select your top 3. Please do not try to vote from the Zoom screen. And we're going to give you about 2 to 3 minutes, about a minute or so to vote. So SJ, if you can give us just a little more sunshine while we wait. Awesome, and if we can pause the music. So, of the both current issues or the areas that the task force has identified, as well as those that were missing, it looks like, the greatest number of people believe that there needs to be a focus around offering mental health training and counseling for police officers so that they can support and de-escalate a variety of situations. That is followed by establish a civilian complaint review board or community transparency board. So the task force is on point there. The community really aligns with that. And for field training, require new officers to attend community meetings and have greater interaction with the community members in their area. Also, we have a need to address structural and procedural issues such as impact role of the sheriff's office, structure of the police department, requirements for new hires, exit interviews for departing officers, and also identify who holds supervisory positions and who can report internal issues. And closing out the top 5, developing strategies for retaining police officers, particularly those of color. So we're going to scroll through the order that you all have prioritized, but again, this information will be both passed on to the subcommittee around criminal justice, and you all will have the information. So now we want to look at some of the things that you all themed around. How can you continue to move the conversation forward? So some of the ideas there were to create a community town hall or roundtable to increase the conversation. And it's just a quick plug that the subcommittee and task force meetings are public and you are invited to attend. Also, police athletic league should include youth in the conversations. Youth want to stay involved. And thanks again to the youth at POW for participating. Need to address the racism in policing, which blames Black and other people of color, and systemic racism in laws and policies to create mass incarceration of Blacks and other people. So the community can make sure, they have that conversation and to make sure that those conversations are held within the city. And also need to make sure engagement in the community is inclusive of people of all backgrounds as well as roles. So activists, police organizations focused on combating racism, whether it's through the YWCA, residents, and more. So again, how do you make sure that all groups, regardless of your role, regardless of what you believe is your expertise, let's make sure you get involved. Awesome. So at this time, we're going to transition back to our screen. We really appreciate, so you all, as you can see, have been having great conversations. We're going to take about a 5-minute break before we start our third conversation. Please stay logged in. Actually, we can cut that to 4 because we're still trying to catch up with ourselves, and we will see you all shortly. So we're coming back, folks. I hope you're back. I hope everyone had a quick stretch. Hopefully, we're able to grab another cup of coffee. But it is time for us to begin to move to our third presentation of the day, which is around real estate and housing. It looks like one of our interpreters' mics is off. We can make sure we turn that on. So with that, here are our real estate and housing subcommittee members, and we are grateful for their commitment to tracking this important issue. And now let's turn on their video.
Hi, everybody. I am Danita Nias, and I am the co-chair of the Real Estate and Housing Subcommittee. The Real Estate and Housing Subcommittee's first priority is to consider options for expanding decent and affordable housing for homeowners and renters. Now, this process will include reviewing housing priorities and programs in the city. It's also going to include exploring sustainable strategies and ways to implement best practices in affordable housing. Our second priority is to focus on ways in which we can mitigate financial barriers and increase programs and funding for prospective homebuyers. This would include assessing investment disparities among neighborhoods and jurisdictions within the city. In addition, identifying obstacles for new homeowners and putting in place strategies to address those obstacles. Our subcommittee considers this process as a journey, a learning journey. And we've been reviewing important data, specifically data related to West Palm Beach. So for example, we have reviewed the housing and related data from the Quantum Foundation's Palm Beach County Health Equity Profile from the December 2020 report. And embedded in that report is housing data specific to disparities according to targeted West Palm Beach zip codes. We've also discussed the Palm Beach County Affordable Housing Needs Assessment, sponsored by the Housing Leadership Council of Palm Beach County, which includes significant information specific to West Palm Beach. We have invited many guest speakers to participate in our meetings and to help inform our thinking. They've educated us on the issues related to affordable housing programs, rental housing regulations, and development initiatives. For example, we have heard from the representative of the Department of Housing and Community Development in our city, the Housing Financial Services at the Housing Authority, the Housing Leadership Council of West Palm Beach, and the city's Development Services and Coding Policies Department. Craig Glover, the Executive Director for RISE, has visited with the committee. We've also heard from our own subcommittee members who are very involved in affordable housing in the city. So we will continue to actively seek policy ideas that support quality housing from subcommittees and other experts in our community to help us consider appropriate strategies in Northwood and throughout our city. So moving forward, the committee will maintain its focus on learning more about the obstacles and the challenges related to decent and affordable housing. I can share that what we know today that will help formulate our recommendation is that clearly building more affordable housing, improving partnerships and investments in historically disinvested communities, while ensuring quality rental housing and supporting paths towards homeownership will remain central to our impending recommendation. We're also looking to continue our learning and to begin to identify more specific and viable policy recommendations that will expand options for decent and affordable housing in West Palm Beach.
Just to reiterate, before you go into breakout rooms, the first priority mentioned was to expand options for decent and affordable housing for both home buyers and renters. And some of the ideas that have been discussed thus far are to develop programs that target use of vacant lots, buying distressed property, as well as building affordable housing on city-owned land, especially in historic Northwest. To promote quality rental housing with incentives or ways to support landlords in addressing substandard conditions inside and outside units. To evaluate zoning strategies, and as well as to invest resources to prioritize code enforcement in the most blighted areas. The second priority, as mentioned, was to mitigate financial barriers and increase programs and funding for prospective home buyers. Some of the ideas are to enhance communications and information sharing about avenues to homeownership, promote greater investment in programs that help people purchase homes, and establish safeguards that support individuals in moving from renting to ownership. Back to you, Donzel.
Thanks, Kayla. And like our first two discussions, we're going to go back into the breakout rooms so you all can discuss, provide your feedback, thoughts, and comments. Again, we would like everyone to answer the three questions we've been asking. Which of the subcommittee ideas are most on target? Are there ideas or issues that the subcommittee still needs to consider? Where would you like to see the conversation go? And how do you want to move the conversation forward? Again, feel free to offer your name and contact information if you feel comfortable doing so, but we really want to hear how can we get the community more involved in the conversation. When you are finished with your discussion, we'll bring you back and transition to our fourth presentation. So see you all shortly. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for another great conversation. Just so that we can keep up with our time, we'll now move on to the Finance, Banking, and Business Subcommittee presentation. Here are our Finance, Banking, Business Subcommittee members. Thank you for all of your effort. And with that, we'll begin their presentation.
Firstly, we decided to gather as much information on our target areas by listening to people in person and having them come to our meetings, and then bring in community leaders as well as bankers. Secondly, we were going to bring in individuals to our meetings who could share information based on actual experiences in the areas of banking and finance. And to help us accomplish that goal, we listened to people who were long-term business owners in the community, as well as people who wanted to join into the business community by opening new operations, new businesses in West Palm Beach. We found that there were many barriers to entry, and some of these involved the bankers who were making the decisions about whether they were going to be lending money to people in the community, either those who were already in business, or those people who wanted to become businessmen and businesswomen within our community. Thirdly, we decided to design a survey which was going to be circulated in the community from which we could gather as much information as possible and insight into the challenges and barriers to entry into business within the city of West Palm Beach, and especially with those who are in the underserved community or the minority community members. And these barriers would be the result of a lack of access to information required to be able to open businesses, such as where do I get my permits, how do I apply for business licenses within the city. Secondly, a lack of local banking services within the geographic area of our city, and language barriers, such as those people who don't speak English but were second language people speaking Spanish, or those people who were speaking Creole from our Haitian community. And thirdly, we found that there were problems caused by an inability for several reasons to access long and short-term capital, especially in situations where people were impacted by COVID and were endeavoring to get PPP loans and were just not capable of securing the funds necessary to continue with their business during the COVID crisis. The purpose of the survey would be to help our subcommittee members to establish objective and achievable goals that we would include in our final report to the mayor. As a committee, one of our initial priorities is a commitment to making recommendations which will improve relationships between small businesses and the local financial institutions. Much more needs to be done in these areas of community-based education, geographical access to banking branches, and overcoming the language barrier, which I mentioned earlier, for those people for whom English is not the primary language. While we're currently exiting the ravages of the pandemic, our community found it telling how many small business owners were either not able to access PPP loans or, having secured applications, were not able to complete those applications and to get them submitted in time to be able to secure funds that were being made available by the federal government or by the local banks through the Small Business Administration. The pandemic aside, we have considered the barriers which those who want to open new businesses may face because of a lack of knowledge about where or how to secure required permits and licenses, or they have a language barrier, as I've already mentioned, or they have a lack of knowledge about how to provide the required financial and tax history to allow the banks to consider them for loans to be able to open their businesses. In an effort to overcome these barriers, we have welcomed businesses and banking representatives who have told us about current programs which their banks are devising to be able to allow people to open the businesses that they desire to be involved with. Another priority is economic advancement of our residents. The same impediments to access to capital exist for those people in the marginalized community as it does with those people in the business community. There are people who desire to access capital who are capable of borrowing, but just don't have the understanding as to how to go about doing it, how to visit with their bankers, how to make records available, and to be able to secure a loan to either buy a new house, build a new house, or secure an existing house or fix up their current houses. We support the concept that people must be able to go into their local banks to be able to secure funds to either buy a new home, fix up their existing home, or be able to build a new house, because residential ownership leads to generational wealth for all people. Our discussions have highlighted the challenges faced by small business owners when opening for business, while in business, and when applying for funding to be able to open a business. We talk about how to create culture of entrepreneurship and the best practices to provide access to capital. An overarching theme is the need for municipal leadership coming from our city to create or incentivize long-term partnerships between the municipal government and those people who are in the banking industry to be able to make funds available to people in the underserved community. We look to our communities to help us determine specific ways to ensure affordable banking and investment in our local small businesses, and to provide good, clean, affordable housing to everyone in the community. Thank you very much for your participation.
As indicated, one of the first priorities for this subcommittee is to improve relationships between small businesses and banking and financing institutions and reduce existing barriers that impede business owners within marginalized communities. Some of the ideas that have been discussed are supporting initiatives that solicit bids from and offer contracts to small and medium businesses, supporting our entrepreneurs in becoming business owners, providing better education and guidance on loan application processes and regulations in all languages, and establishing a small business mentors or ambassadors program for new business owners. Second priority is supporting residents' economic advancement by addressing gaps and opportunities to access capital and build wealth. Some of the ideas discussed are supporting minority home ownership, as well as supporting partnerships between banks and community organizations that provide financial education, literacy, and resources to the community. Now for our discussion.
Thanks, Kayla, and thank you all for sticking with us. As you know, we are going into our fourth breakout session, and thank you also to the National Forum for Black Public Administrators South Florida chapter for joining us. You all by now know the drill. We're going to ask you to answer the following three questions. Which of the subcommittee ideas seem to be on target? What's missing? And how do you want to move the conversation forward? Again, feel free to offer your name if you would like to, personally be in touch with the subcommittee. We're going to move you into your breakouts now, and we will bring you back in 17 minutes. So thank you so much. Let's get going into the breakouts. All right, welcome back, everyone. As you all return, please remember to mute your microphones. We're going to quickly transition to discuss your conversation 2 and 3, starting with health. So we're going to, and if you have your window open from your previous voting, you can use that. But if not, we're going to drop this and bring up the screen that looks at the themes that you all came up with. So one of the things that they discussed in your conversation around health, and we said what was on target, you agree that access is definitely on target. How do we create mobile services, bring the services into the community? You also talked about, healthy food and providing or discussing disparity of food options, addressing inequities in the lack of access to resources and information in communities of color. Could scroll down a little bit. And that includes building relationships, building trust, and establishing partnerships. You also said they were on target with the need to provide more education and provide education to community and improve access to information about health. When we look at what was missing, you all, the areas that had the highest level of consensus around what was missing was increase the availability of access to mental health resources, create a culture around fighting the stigma of mental health, and then additional themes that won't be a part of the prioritization, but we wanted to make sure we noted, was promoting and encouraging more diversity in healthcare, encouraging students of color to become more interested in supporting them in studying medicine, provide online access to doctors and mental health resources, and make sure youth have access to mental health services, including school-based services as well as online. So we're going to put the link in the chat. You have it there if you have the window open, and we're going to ask you to go there quickly so that we can begin to vote on prioritizing what's on target and what's missing. So again, you want to click the link. Your screen will come up in a separate window similar to this one, and we need you to click on or pick your top 3. So just to kind of walk you through, if that window isn't already open, in the chat, you'll see a link that says voting. You're going to click on that in your chat. It's going to pop up a separate window that will provide the same list that's here on your Zoom screen, and you're going to pick your top 3. Great. I see several people are voting. We're going to give you one more minute. We're going to close this right at 12:50 and go to our next conversation. All right, if we can now look at where we are with the voting. Excellent. So it looks like some of the ones that were additions actually broke through. So into priority. So the first one was increase availability and access to mental health resources and services. Is something that had been previously missing and should be a focus. Target resources towards community-based clinics. Promote policies aimed at ensuring equitable access to healthy, affordable food options. Create mobile services to address the needs of the community that lack easy access to accessible healthcare. Improve availability of resources for proactive and preventive health. Create a culture around fighting the stigma of mental health. Build partnerships with community leaders such as clergy, and build community desire uh, for greater education opportunities on how patients can access healthcare. So that is appreciate the realignment around those issues, and we'll make sure that the subcommittee gets that. Our next one, our next conversation. Some of the samples around how you all could get involved, or what can the community do to have more ownership. Partner with local universities and colleges, including nurses and other healthcare professional organizations to push the conversation forward. Need a collective conversation about funding and education. We need to address the history of health inequities, provide resources for mental health, partner with similar communities across the nation who are addressing the same issues. Churches are interested in partnering, so let's partner with our community anchors, increase food options with community gardens, and let's get medications to poor communities and provide access to community doctors. So those are some of the ways that we can engage the community. So that we're going to go to our next conversation. And so what was on target, code enforcement is really critical. Affordable housing and examining that is vital. Thinking about the location of affordable housing and relationships to jobs, which because of the commute, access issues, and since there's a reliance on vehicles to get to jobs, employers and developers should invest in making sure there's convenient access or transit-oriented development. Provide support and education to help residents transition from being renters to owners. Um, Make sure people understand their rights, training for renters and landlords, focused on zoning density and neighborhood revitalization. Financial literacy, making sure you increase and sustain financial access to teachers and other blue collar workers. Make sure residents in the community are involved and included in decision making around housing, leadership, councils for zoning, and for financial education so community members understand the process in purchasing a home. What was missing from the list is more accountability for landlords, especially slumlords who don't live in the city. Address affordability of housing for underserved community. And then other themes that didn't have as much consensus, but we wanted to make sure you all heard them, were to provide housing reparations like what happened in North Carolina, access to grants to facilitate home ownership, hold developers accountable for promises made to the city in the past, create methods to promote anti-displacement policies as gentrification increases, better define what we mean by affordable to who. So looking at, beyond just the measures of median income and how should it not be based on market rate. Some of the ways that people believe that we can increase the conversation to get more involved. Oh, sorry, we're ready to vote and then we'll do that. So click on your link. And again, you have the list of what's on target and what was missing. And we want you to vote for your top 3 to prioritize. And again, we'll give you about a minute to do that. And so the link is still in the chat if you need to open that window again. and you're voting for your top 3. I think we're ready to transition. Awesome. So it looks like, again, we had a few of the what's missing breakthrough to become a top priority. So the first is develop programs that target use of vacant lots, partnerships to buy distressed properties and build affordable housing on city-owned land, especially in the historic Northwest. There's a need to, second was need to address affordability of housing for underserved communities, promote greater investment in programs that help people purchase home, promote quality rental with incentives or ways to support landlords in addressing substandard conditions, both inside and outside the unit. More accountability for landlords, especially for slumlords who do not live in the city. Enhance communication and information sharing about avenues to home ownership and support programs. Establish safeguards to support individuals in moving from renting to owning. Evaluate zoning strategies and implement implications towards density changes. And finally, invest in resources to prioritize code enforcement in the most blighted areas and other targeted neighborhoods. In ways that we can continue the conversation or ensure that the community gets involved is we could be working with the CRA to have houses built on vacant land space and to have more building of single family homes. So having conversations with the community about how to activate those vacant land spaces. We need to discuss how to have a more equitable distribution of city improvements to communities. Let's help people without credit with their paperwork and access programs to improve credit. Provide education and assistance to persons without credit to provide opportunities for home ownership. So having those conversations and dialogues in a real way. Address redlining, so historical inequities, appraisals of homes, values, and take a look at reparations. So those are some of the ways that the conversation can be continued. All right, so that was the real estate, and now we're going to transition to our 5th conversation. Last but certainly not least, we're going to look at the presentation for education and workforce development. Here are your education and workforce development subcommittee members. Again, we appreciate your efforts to support opportunities for our youth and adults. And let's bring up the video.
Hi, my name is Alexandria Ayala, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Education and Workforce Development Subcommittee of the City of West Palm Beach's Mayor's Task Force on Racial and Ethnic Equality. Our subcommittee has identified 2 top priorities for our work in education and workforce development: improving offerings of career development, workforce training, and education opportunities for youth and adults. That includes providing career development and vocational training, as well as developing strategies to address barriers in marginalized communities. Since January of this year, our subcommittee has made great progress in our work for education and workforce development. By collecting and analyzing disaggregated data on outcomes and the historical paths that led us to where we are today in the city of West Palm Beach, we've been able to understand where we came from, who we are, and how we got here. We've been able to invite educators from the city of West Palm Beach and stakeholders such as CareerSource, adult education experts to inform us of their offerings for those in West Palm Beach and the surrounding areas. And we've been able to expand our own knowledge of how those services and resources can help our community. Those conversations have greatly informed our work and allowed us to move forward on providing the best recommendations to the City Commission and the Mayor on future policies that may impact these outcomes for our community. Moving forward, our subcommittee and its members will continue to expand on the knowledge we have about services, resources, supports, and ideas that could make improvements for our city and for the residents of the city in regards to education and workforce development. That requires your input. We would love to have you present at any of our meetings. They're all publicly available. Please come and share your experiences with us, share your thoughts and best practices. We want to hear from you. In that vein, we have education surveys that will be going out to community residents, stakeholders, leaders, etc. We want your participation, so please be on the lookout to participate and share your thoughts with us on how we can do the best job in providing recommendations to the City Commission and the Mayor. figuring out ways for our work as a task force and eventually a city to circumvent the financial needs that exist and that often perpetuate the divide of resources that we as a task force members are not authorized to help with is our next step. It is also important that recommendations we look at have input and are coordinated in partnership with the School District of Palm Beach County. Improving our schools will be a joint approach that will take all stakeholders at the table. Need to shift forward in thinking and future-oriented mindset, moving from what the circumstances have been in the past to what the city of West Palm Beach could be in the future.
As mentioned, the first priority for education is to improve offerings of career development, workforce training, and education opportunities for youth and adults. Some of the ideas being discussed and welcome your feedback is to improve information sharing and outreach for access to existing education, career, and workforce opportunities, to leverage business partnerships and offer incentives to businesses to hire workforce development candidates, to target policies and tailor workforce programs toward trending or high demand industries, and to establish community-based centrally located career services. The second priority mentioned is to elevate the quality of resources for under-resourced schools by attracting and retaining qualified teachers and improving school supports. Some of the ideas being discussed are to explore business partnerships in creating literacy and enrichment programs, to explore sustainable funding sources that go beyond program-specific grants to support teachers in schools, to target strategies toward early childhood education, and to invest specifically in children's services, counseling, childcare support, and transportation services.
Thanks, Kellen. So we're going to move right into our final breakout, which we're going to ask you to again identify which ideas are most on target, what still needs to be considered, and how do you want to move the conversation forward. And as always, feel free to offer your name and contact information, and we'll make sure the subcommittee gets it. Once you finish your conversation, we'll bring you back and we'll be examining the themes from finance and banking. See you all soon. All right, welcome back, everyone. You have just completed your final conversation of the day. And now we're going to just kind of do some theming of the last two conversations, starting with finance, banking, and business. Just as a quick note, I want to make sure that you all are all aware that none of the information that you shared in your conversations will be lost. Everything that was entered by your facilitators, we've captured, and we will turn over all of those comments to the task force and each subcommittee around the policy area of the discussion. So now let's review the finance, banking, and business team results. We're going to share the screen. So when you talked about what was on target, providing mentors and ambassadors to help navigate the process for small business owners, this is important and helpful. Speaking to bankers is a challenge. So yes, this should be addressed. Immigrant communities feel uncomfortable with even talking to bankers. This can be intimidating. Important to have small, accessible, and Florida-owned banks in the local community. Need to address banking practices and banking laws which adversely impact the development of minority and women-owned business. Need to educate small businesses so that they are able to access resources. For instance, businesses need to register to have their paperwork in order, even to have received a PPE loan or identified a lender who could connect them to the SBA for the loan. And people need to know how to do that. Outreach to the communities from banks is very important, including financial education. Regulations permits bidding on new business. So many barriers to in getting that access. And for small entrepreneurs, it is too costly and discouraging. Making these processes easier would be a help. Fair business contracting for small and minority businesses through the city purchasing department. For example, a lot of immigrant-owned businesses don't even know that procurement opportunities exist. So those were some of the things that were on target. Let's transition to what are some things that are missing or should be added. Providing increased financial literacy education, particularly for youth, small business plans, or micro entrepreneur plans, helping them create those, how to start a business and banking policies, addressing biases against Black and Brown residents when they apply for capital. And some themes that we want to make sure are acknowledged, but will not be a part of the prioritization is need credit unions and community banks to support and take a stake in the community. So we're going to combine what's missing along with the what's on target, and we're going to ask you to prioritize. We put the link in the chat. There are several comments, so we're going to keep adding it so that it's at the bottom of the chat. But you want to click on the link, and we want to give you an opportunity to vote on which of these is the priority. So just to run through them: develop or support initiatives that solicit bids from banks and offer contracts to small and medium businesses. Invest in strategies to support entrepreneurs to become business owners. Provide better education and guidance in the loan application process and small business regulation in alternative formats in multiple languages. Establish small business mentors for ambassadors who can provide support to new business owners. Support minority home ownership, through business. Support partnerships between banks and community organizations that provide financial education, literacy resources to the community. Provide increased financial literacy education, particularly for youth, small business, in creating small business plans or micro entrepreneur plans, and how to start business and banking policies. And address the biases against Black and Brown residents as they apply for capital. So the link is in the chat at the bottom of the chat. Please click on that. It will open up your ability to vote, and we want you to pick your top 3. And since we're kind of on schedule, I think we can give them 2 minutes or so. So SJ, if you want to give us a little voting music, that would be awesome. I apologize because we know that when we do it with this screen up, it's a little echoey. So we're gonna hold off on the music here, but in a moment we're gonna take a stretch break and we're gonna get plenty of music then. But we want to make sure that you all vote. And if we could put the correct link in one more time for me, Todd. There it is. So that's the correct link. If you could click on that, it will bring up exactly what you're seeing on the Zoom screen now. And you're going to pick your top 3 areas. Great comment, Shakima. She's like, it's a hard list. There's so many good ideas on it. And that's been the case throughout the day. You all have really invested a lot of thought and invested how to move your communities forward. So, thank yourselves for these difficult choices. All right, so let's look at, we're going to refresh it. So here we are. So the top again, and each time, so we thank the committee for the work they've done, but this time actually the top 3 look like breakthrough ideas, right? And so meaning that these were what we're missing ideas. So the top priority was to provide increased financial literacy education, particularly for youth, for small business and microeconomic plans and how to start a business and understanding banking policies. It was followed by support partnerships between banks and community organizations that provide financial education, literacy, and resources to the community. Address biases against Black and Brown residents when they apply for capital. Establish small business mentors or ambassadors who can provide support to new business owners as they navigate the system. Support minority home ownership, which can contribute to capital. Invest in strategies to support entrepreneurs to become business owners. Provide better education and guidance in the loan application process, and small business regulations should be accessible in multiple formats in all languages. And then finally, develop or support initiatives that solicit bids and offer contracts to small and medium businesses. So that was a great conversation. You all did an awesome job there. And again, like I said, if you don't see your direct comment listed here, understand that all the comments have been captured for the subcommittee to review. And now how do we move the conversation forward is by we can spread awareness of existing mentoring programs for business owners. We can use the green market as a way to introduce homegrown businesses from the area to come into obtaining funding as a small business and grow into a larger business, which of course means more employees, local employees. We need to keep stepping up outreach and financial literacy campaigns using a variety of means, including social media. We also need to increase outreach to volunteers who can provide additional skills to help in training and dissemination of information. And we need to develop mentoring and education outreach programs in schools, beginning with elementary schools, so students can learn early about being an entrepreneur and business. So awesome. Thank you all so much for that. And we're gonna, as we're theming our next ideas, we have a couple of things, but the first thing is a stretch break. And so now we're going to transition to the stretch break, which should be a little bit more active physically, and you've been active mentally. So my colleague, Gabrielle Jackson, will lead us through a quick 5-minute break. We've been sitting and staring at our screens for quite some time now, so it'll be a great opportunity to move around. So now that we've kind of loosened up our body, we want to kind of touch into a final piece before we theme the final session, which is Dr. Corinna Mabius, cultural anthropologist and critical race scholar, who will review some of the root causes of inequity with you. So I want to turn it over to Dr. Mabius, and we can, for this important information.
Great. Thank you, Donzel. The more you learn about history, the more you'll notice a relationship between what happened centuries or decades ago and what is happening right now. I want to start with a shout out to a famous Haitian American scholar and historian, Michel Rolfe-Trio. He urges us to think about how and why certain histories have been silenced. When you dig into silenced histories, you start to learn about all the systems and laws and often violent practices that have been set up to reinforce income inequality and then make it seem natural, as if it were based on inherent racial differences. Silenced histories also include the true and inspiring stories of people working together in solidarity to help create a more just and equitable society. Now, we tend to think of the struggle for civil rights as something that began in the 1960s. But immediately after the Civil War and the official ending of slavery in the US, Blacks in Florida and other parts of the South began organizing. They organized for the right to vote. They created and participated in networks of mutual aid societies, fraternal orders, churches, and other organizations. They held secret get out the vote meetings. And when they did achieve the right to vote, they voted in large numbers at every opportunity. White Floridians who had taken up arms against the US were denied the right to vote, which gave Black voters a distinct but only temporary voting advantage. So citizens voted educated Blacks into public office. Black Floridians started businesses. They opened schools. Florida had Black constables and sheriffs and a Black Secretary of State, Jonathan Gibbs, who contributed to improvements in public education. Congress overwhelmingly passed a law providing reparations to the formerly enslaved, but President Jackson vetoed the law. Nonetheless, the Southern Homestead Act of 1866 helped 2,012 Black Floridians receive land. And freedmen's bureaus helped African Americans negotiate fair contracts, which they leveraged to organize unions, fight for improved working conditions, buy land, and start their own farms. The man you see here, the Honorable Josiah Thomas Walls, was born into slavery. He used his job teaching at a Florida Freedmen's Bureau after the Civil War to buy land and get involved in politics. He eventually became a Florida congressman who advocated for a national system of education. And mind you, this was in the 1870s. During Reconstruction, African Americans were making lots of gains in politics, business, and education. But white property owners were not pleased. They launched an effort to stop these gains. It helps us to think of the similarities between what happened then and the backlash that is happening in the US right now. One way to prevent Black advancement was through the law. Early Florida laws, called Black codes, permitted only whites to serve as jurors, for example. Black police officers could only arrest Blacks. Southern states capitalized on a loophole in the 13th Amendment, which bans slavery and indentured servitude unless you've been punished and convicted for a crime. Putting people in prison was profitable for private white-owned companies, which leased convicts from the prisons. The convicts, most of them Black, were convicted on charges prone to racial bias, like vagrancy and disorderly conduct. They worked in horrific conditions and lived short lives because they were considered easily replaceable. So let's reflect on the situation today. Florida's Black students are more than twice as likely to be suspended or expelled from school than their peers based on charges prone to racial bias, like, you guessed it, disorderly conduct. And this is a charge that Black students receive 7 times more often than other kids, often because, as research shows, white teachers are more likely to perceive Black youth as threatening. In the Palm Beach County School District, Black students are 4 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Black Floridians are also more likely than whites to be sentenced to prison for non-violent felonies, even when they don't have past convictions. We must look at systemic racism that has created a pipeline of African Americans into Florida's prison system. During Reconstruction, Florida's early real estate industry began working closely with the KKK to intimidate Black homeowners, farmers, and business owners into abandoning or selling their land to whites. When KKK members beat a Black Florida landowner and destroyed his home, for example, the white attackers were acquitted, but the Black landowner lost his property in court, and then he and his wife were accused and convicted for false charges against their attackers. And this was considered justice. These threats of violence did not stop West Palm Beach residents like Alice Mickens of Historic Northwest from organizing for change. She and her husband hosted many famous activists at their home and rooming house. Alice worked closely with Mary McLeod Bethune to get women the right to vote, aware of the particular barriers for Black women. In the years to follow, however, racially biased laws, policies, and practices help create and maintain systemic and structural racial disparities. Racial bias in schools and within the justice system helped limit the right to vote. Until 2009, Florida was one of only 4 states where people convicted of a felony effectively lost their right to vote for life. Lost voting rights meant less leverage to change the racially biased sentencing and policing practices that were sending disproportionate numbers of African Americans to prison in the first place. Systemic racism has also impacted immigrant, Latino, and Caribbean communities. When Cuban emigres arrived in 1959, the vast majority were socially white. They were welcomed with housing, clothing, jobs, and other resources. But immigration laws changed when darker-skinned immigrants, such as Afro-Cubans, Haitians, Mexicans, and Central Americans began to arrive. They have received far fewer supports and are often portrayed as criminals. Lack of investment in Black neighborhoods has also had an impact on housing quality and availability, school quality, prosperity, and health. Limited access to grocery stores that offer fresh and healthy food can lead to health disparities, for instance. Research shows that when students are given access to advanced coursework opportunities, they engage more in school, leading to fewer absences and suspensions and higher graduation rates. But for decades, Black students in West Palm Beach were denied such opportunities. And now in Palm Beach County School District, white students are 3.6 times more likely to be enrolled in at least one advanced placement class. As Industrial High School alumna Georgia Singletary has recalled, "We never got new books. We got hand-me-downs from the other schools." When Florida launched statewide testing in 1977, it created a literacy test flunked by 78% of Black students compared to 25% of whites. But plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit pointed to the racial bias embedded in the test questions and the program itself. Teachers were given just 4 months to prepare students for the test. Plus, competency tests were also supposed to measure adult life skills, but there was no instruction offered in these skills at Black schools. Black students who failed the test were given a certificate of completion instead of a diploma, and that didn't count if you wanted to get a job within the state. And Florida hired only 10% of its labor force from those who lacked high school diplomas. You couldn't use a certificate to apply to a state university either. These are root causes of education and employment disparities that we still see today. Systemic racism has also influenced who builds wealth, who is offered or who is provided the information and resources needed for jobs, loans, good interest rates on mortgages, and market rate prices for their homes, for instance. West Palm Beach residents have a history of working to help others in the face of these racial barriers, however. In 1944, Black residents of West Palm Beach organized to provide social services for members of the city's Black neighborhoods who weren't receiving these services from the city. They opened local clubs to distribute food, clothing, aid for the sick, and other services. Racist stereotypes have also played a role in maintaining racial inequity. These stereotypes reinforce racial bias. They portray Blacks, Latinos, and immigrants as naturally dangerous and lazy, while propping up the idea that whites are naturally law-abiding and hardworking. Discriminatory practices and policies are not something we may immediately see, especially if they're not affecting us. But those who see the conditions of poor neighborhoods may assume, based on stereotypes, that it's the fault of the residents. By hiding structural and systemic racism, stereotypes perpetuate myths that make racial and economic inequity seem natural or justified. Pure greed is one of the root causes of racial inequity, the making of profits at the expense of people of color, whether as free or underpaid labor or by the seizure of property and exploitation through financial scams. For example, in 2006, the peak year for subprime mortgage lending in South Florida, Black families in West Palm Beach earning $200,000 or more annually were more likely, on average, to be given the worst kind of loan, a subprime loan, than a white family making only $30,000 a year. Your participation in this summit will go down in West Palm Beach history as a vital step toward a more just and equitable city. Please stay involved. You can participate in subcommittee meetings, communicate via Facebook and Instagram, or send us an email via our task force's comprehensive website, which has much more information on West Palm Beach history and current disparities than I have time to share now. Sign up for the task force newsletter via the website, and we'll send you a list of books we recommend. Access the silenced histories that are so important for us all to know about as we move forward collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinna. And you'll see in the chat opportunity to fill out surveys. And as Dr. Mavia said, please stay involved. Please attend the subcommittee task force meetings, the main task force meetings. A lot of this work is so that we can, hear your voice. And as the mayor had charged the task force with, creating a more equitable West Palm Beach. So at this time, we're going to review the results from our final discussion of the day, which is education and workforce development. So we're going to switch screens and take a look. So what was on target? you all indicated that targeting vocational training for in-demand jobs is on target, but you also need workforce development. Underrepresentation of minorities and white collar jobs is an issue. Address the lack of accessibility to apprenticeship programs to increase employment opportunities for people of color. Also, the quality of early childhood learning, especially important in poor communities, so that students can, read and succeed. We can break the cycle. Wraparound services like mental health, which can help keep. I'm sorry, I have to figure out how to do this in a way. There we go. Wraparound services like mental health services at schools, which help keep resources more centrally located. Supporting and retaining teachers is important. And then if we look at what's missing, provide support for hiring and developing quality teachers. Create resources designed for parents of students so that youth can access support systems outside of the classroom and increase opportunities for family and parent engagement with schools in general. Some other themes that were mentioned, but didn't have the level of consensus to be prioritized, but we want to make sure you all hear them and we acknowledge them, is to address disparity between Title I schools and other schools. More highly qualified teachers are needed at Title I schools. Create access to eliminate language barriers for those who do not have the ability to advocate for their students to go to better schools. Increase the accessibility of the arts for students, including access to performing arts schools. Develop universal access to additional resources for different learners and students with different learning needs. So what we're going to do is take these priorities and ask you to vote. We've put the link into the chat again. We've done it 4 times. It's the 5th time, so we should have the process down. We're going to ask you, you're going to click on the link. You're going to see the same page that is in your Zoom. And we're going to ask you to vote on your top 3. And the options are improve information sharing and outreach for access to existing education, career, workforce opportunities, leverage business partnerships to offer incentives to businesses to hire workforce development candidates, target policies and tailor workforce programs towards trending or high demand industries, establish community-based centrally located career services, explore business partnerships in creating literacy and enrichment programs, explore sustainable funding sources that go beyond program-specific grants to support teachers in schools, target strategies toward early childhood education, invest specifically in children's services, counseling, child support, and transportation support. Provide support for hiring and developing quality teachers. Create resources designed for parents of students so that youth can access support systems outside of the classroom and increase opportunities for family and parents engagement with schools in general. So if you could please vote, we would greatly appreciate it. So great. So this time, again, this is why we do this, because, while as you can see, the top issue that the task force has been working on has been number 2, but the number 1 response with the most was a new idea around what's missing, and that was to create resources designed for parents of students so that youth can access support systems outside of the classroom and increase opportunities for family, parent engagement with schools in general, followed by improve information sharing, outreach for access to existing education, career, and workforce opportunities. So definitely keep working on that education and workforce subcommittee. Establish community-based, centrally located career services, leverage business partnerships, and offer incentives to business to hire workforce development candidates, target policies, and tailor workforce programs towards trending and high demand industries, invest specifically in children's services such as counseling, childcare support, and transportation support, explore sustainable funding that goes beyond program-specific grants to support teachers in schools, target strategies towards early childhood education, explore business partnerships, in creating literacy and enrichment programs. And the final priority, provide support for hiring and developing quality teachers. So thank you all so much for that awesome input. We really appreciate that. And, just once again, want to thank you all for actively engaging, for these 4 hours. I know the time has flown. You all have been busy talking in these discussions. Your feedback, ideas, and comments will greatly inform and influence the task force and policy area subcommittee direction. I would now like to turn it over to Mayor Keith James to make closing remarks. Mayor James.
Thank you very much, Donzel, and thanks to each and every one of you who have hung in there for these 4 hours. The vision I've articulated for the city, and it's something that I stated during my campaign, and I continue to articulate wherever I go, is I want West Palm Beach to be a community of opportunity for all. A community of opportunity for all, whereby any citizen, no matter their zip code, no matter their ethnic background, racial background, sexual preference, can find a place to realize their dreams in West Palm Beach. And in order to achieve that vision, we all must work together and strive towards creating a more equitable city for all. And that's why we have this summit. The purpose of these action summits is to ensure community members from all areas of the city, from all walks of life, can voice their thoughts, their feelings, and their experiences about these topics. And we want to ensure that our task force is headed in the right direction, because your voice matters and is so important to this conversation. This is your city. And I want to be 100% certain that the recommendations of the task force, that the recommendations that will come to me and the commissioners are true reflections of what improvements the community wants, the citizens of West Palm Beach. What do you want? What do your neighbors want? What does your family want? I want these recommendations to be right, not rushed. So while we've made tremendous progress so far, there's still ways to go before we have achieved success. Our work is not yet over. I ask each and every one of you to continue to stay engaged and be part of the conversation so that we can work towards a more equitable West Palm Beach. Thank you all so much for your time today, for your input today, for your energy, for your contributions, and stay tuned and continue to work with us as we make West Palm Beach a community of opportunity for all. Thank you, everyone.
And we thank you for your leadership, Mayor James. We appreciate all that you've done. Thank you to our interpreters, merci, gracias. We really appreciate that. And thank you for those who participated in person, and to our satellite spaces who offered up their space, the Police Athletic League, the Esperanza Community Center, the Downtown Development Authority, South Olive Community Center, Coleman Park Community Center, and the Mandel Public Library. We really appreciate it. We want to know how we did. So we're going to put a survey into the chat. We ask you to fill that out for us before you go today. And we're going to give you a little music to do so. And I would love to take a little personal privilege and thank the theme team from Justice and Sustainability Associates, who were working diligently to collect all of your ideas, to synthesize them into themes for you to vote on. As you know, each conversation, we had over, almost 200 people in every conversation, and they were processing all of that information. So we thank you so much for that. And we look forward to you all continuing this conversation of, racial and ethnic equality in West Palm Beach. So we're going to give you a little music. We're going to ask you before you go to please fill out the survey. And thank you all so much.
Wake up all the doctors, make the old people well.
Thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.